A first-class ticket, a symbol of her achievement, was met with a sneer that cut deeper than any blade. The economy line is over there. In that moment, a billionaire CEO, one of the most influential women in global finance, was reduced to nothing in their eyes. Phones hovered, whispers spread like wildfire, and the humiliation burned at her chest. But the silence that followed wasn't weakness. It was the calm before a storm. With a single, calculated gesture, she was about to flip the script, ground an entire flight, and bring a powerful corporation to its knees. The morning rush at O'Hare International buzzed with routine chaos. Announcements blared, luggage wheels rattled, and lines snaked across the concourse. Amidst the crowd, Isla Vance, a striking woman in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, moved with an aura of quiet confidence. In her hand, she held a first-class ticket. To most, it was just paper. To her, it was validation of decades of unyielding brilliance, grit, and a resilience that had forged her into an empire builder. But to the check-in agent, it meant nothing. "Economy line's over there," the agent said, her voice clipped and condescending. Isla's eyebrows arched slightly. She glanced down at the bold A1 first class stamped on her boarding pass. "This is the first-class line," Isla replied evenly, her voice a low, steady hum. The agent's lips twisted into a half-smile. "Not today, it isn't." She gestured dismissively to the sprawling economy crowd, her tone sharp enough for others to hear. A few passengers snickered, assuming Isla had been caught in a futile attempt to elevate her station. Heat crawled up Isla's spine, but she didn't argue. Not yet. She simply slid her ticket back in her leather portfolio and stepped aside, the burning humiliation of fire she would use later. The gauntlet of disrespect continued. At security, an officer singled her out for an extra random screening while others streamed through. In the exclusive lounge, the attendant shook her head. "Not on the list." At the gate, another agent offered a smug sneer. "Business or economy?" "Because first class is full." Every step was a new microaggression, each one a polished blade of prejudice. When she finally reached the boarding door, the final blow landed. A flight attendant blocked her entry, hand raised like a stop sign. "This line is for premium passengers only." Isla held up her boarding pass, seat 1B. The attendant's smirk mirrored the agent from earlier. "Then it must be a mistake." Laughter rippled from a few bystanders, and a dozen phones lifted, cameras ready to capture the spectacle. Isla felt the sting of every eye, stripping her of her dignity. She could have shouted. She could have argued. Instead, she did something far more dangerous. She fell silent, her eyes locked on the attendant's, unblinking, unflinching. Then, slowly she raised her hand. Two fingers pressed against her portfolio in a gesture that seemed meaningless to the crowd. But within seconds, heads turned. Gate agents glanced nervously at one another. Passengers whispered as a sudden, chilling tension rippled through the boarding area. That silent gesture wasn't meaningless at all. It was a signal. Within minutes, two men in tailored suits strode toward the gate. They weren't passengers. They were members of the airline's corporate security detail. They stopped dead in front of Isla, bowing their heads slightly in a clear sign of respect. The crowd went silent. "Is there a problem, Ms. Vance?" one of the men asked. The attendant's smirk crumbled. She doesn't belong in this line. I was just enforcing policy." Isla finally spoke, her voice calm but lethal. "Policy? Interesting. Would you like me to explain your actual policy to the board of directors, or should I let them watch this live stream first?" She gestured to the phone's recording. Murmurs swelled, and the attendant's face drained of color. In that moment, the truth clicked for everyone. Isla Vance wasn't just another passenger. She wasn't even just a wealthy traveler. She was one of the largest shareholders of the airline, a board member whose influence reached deeper than any CEO's handshake. And she had just been publicly humiliated. When Isla finally boarded, she didn't sit quietly. She turned her phone camera on herself and spoke 3 words that would ignite the internet. "Ground this flight." The cabin erupted in confusion. Pilots were ordered back to the gate. Passengers fumed. And within the hour, clips of Islah's calm command flooded social media. Hashtag grounded by truth trended worldwide. News anchors scrambled to explain why a plane sat idle as a woman in seat 1B stared out the window with unnerving serenity. But the real storm came days later. At an emergency board meeting, Islah arrived with a stack of documents under her arm. Emails, reports, and testimonies, all proof of systemic discrimination hidden under the guise of random checks and policy enforcement. She laid them on the table like daggers. "This isn't about one flight," she said, her voice slicing through the boardroom silence. "This is about a culture of humiliation that you've allowed to fester. You've targeted passengers who look like me, penalized employees who speak out, and rewarded executives who bury the truth. That ends today." The CEO shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Vance, with all due respect, you can't just—" She cut him off. "I own 20% of this airline. I can and I will." Gasps circled the table. Board members exchanged uneasy glances. She wasn't bluffing. Her portfolio made her one of the largest single stakeholders in the company. Islah turned to the shareholders present. "You've all seen the videos. You've read the reports. You know what this is costing us. Financially, legally, morally. Today, you decide. Protect a corrupt system or protect your company's survival." The vote wasn't close. The CEO was suspended. An independent investigation was launched, and Islah, though offered the interim CEO role, refused. "I don't need a title," she said. "What I need is accountability." Instead, she created a new Council of Ethics and Inclusion, led not by executives, but by frontline employees, the very people who had suffered under the discrimination. She tore down the bonus system that rewarded enforcement and replaced it with incentives for fairness, service, and transparency. 6 months later, the results were undeniable. Complaints of discrimination plummeted. Employee satisfaction soared. Passenger loyalty rebounded. And Islah's silent gesture at that boarding gate became a global symbol. Proof that dignity, when defended with courage, can topple even the most arrogant of systems. Back at O'Hare, on the anniversary of that fateful flight, Islah walked once again toward the premium lane. This time, the attendant straightened as she approached, greeting her with a respectful nod that went beyond words. Islah handed over her boarding pass without a word, her eyes steady, her silence powerful. Because silence had once been forced upon her. Now, it was the weapon she wielded, and the world had learned. Never mistake quiet for powerless.